Hey there, good evening. Nice to see you. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is BronxNet's program where we talk to reporters and writers and journalists and editors and people putting stuff out in the news. And that's the way you can get the insight and the inside on what's going on. And in our second segment, we do artists and performers. And we have a wonderful, legendary Bronx photographer going to be on the show in the second segment. But now let's do the first segment and say good evening to Patrick Spauster, who is a freelance reporter. And what caught my eye was a couple of pieces on city limits. Nice to see you, Patrick.
Thanks for having me.
Just since we haven't had you on the program before, so your background is are you from here? Are you from somewhere else? Just tell us how you got into this nasty game of journalism.
Yeah, I'm a journalist that focuses on housing and homelessness. I actually went to NYU to get an urban planning degree, but and I have a background in research, but found myself really liking digging into storytelling about what's going on in the city with housing and homelessness, which is such a crucial and evolving issue. And in particular, I've been focusing a lot on the role that data can play in journalism and telling those stories, how to get some hard to get data, analyze it, and figure out what the data says about what's going on in our city and what's important.
But before we get into something that I have expressed to you, I thought was fascinating. Why housing and homelessness? In other words, there are many reporters who'll cover anything they're asked to, and they'll get into this or that or the other. But you have expressed this is your thing.
Part of that is due to my background in researching housing and what I feel is like a really important issue. But I also think that it's a crucial area for using data to express important themes about what's going on in our city. So more of our policymakers are using data in their decision making. Companies, real estate, other actors like the government are all using data and analytics to power how they operate. And I think there's a crucial role for journalism there to keep it accountable. And it's crucial to have journalism that empowers people to understand data and how it's being used. And that's kind of the case for this project.
That is absolutely fascinating because with homelessness, as with many other issues, everybody's got an opinion. We all see homeless people all around us. We may know people, etc. We may be those people. And this is a way of saying, wait a minute, if you believe that, here's the information. All right. So you wrote this really fascinating story. And I'm going to, it was Exit Unknown. Where do people go after leaving New York City homeless shelters? The analogy I make is that all through Kentucky and Tennessee and Louisiana, we're getting tornadoes and floods and storms, and we see these terrible, absolutely horrible videos of towns being leveled and people standing there going, oh my goodness, and I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying it's just absolutely horrible to see. Where are all those people now? What happened to them, especially in states that don't have big social nets to catch people? New York has its own issues, but not that. We really do have some, social programs. What happens to them? So your question is, when Mayor Adams says, there's a limit to your stay in the shelter, where do they go? That's my introduction. So here's the question: where do they go?
Yeah,
help! Where are they?
and digging into this, I really we don't know nearly as much as we could, or some say as we should, about where people go when they leave shelter. It kind of starts with in 2022, the city council passed a law requiring that the city overhaul the way they report data on homelessness. And as a result of that, the city has been putting out new counts that show, by our count, at city limits that we created, 147,000 people in the most recent count that are living in New York City homeless shelters right now, which is a staggering number. That's
staggering number.
Greater than the population of Syracuse, New York, for example.
And let me just mention, it's not only New York. I saw a story on the network news last night about Los Angeles with like 150,000. So I realized I'm not minimizing New York's problem, but this is a nationwide problem. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Certainly. And I think what was really revealing about this is what we don't know about where people go is just as telling about what's going on with homelessness as what we do know. So, for example, I found that over half, or 55% of the households that exited a Department of Homeless Services shelter in the past 11 months or so, we don't know where they get. That's the exit that gets flagged unknown in the data. That's so more than half of those
Wow.
households, we don't know where they're going. And that was part of the reporting requirements under this city council law, was to try and get a better sense for what's going on. And so this data has just started to come out, and we're trying to capture what's going on. So to give it a little perspective, that's the number of people that are exiting each month from DHS shelters is approximately 10% of the monthly population.
Right.
And then that means just 2% of those that are in DHS shelters are exiting to some sort of permanent housing,
Wow.
right? Because most of the folks that are exiting, we don't know where they go.
So when we talk about the correction system, and obviously the shelter system is not a correction system, but we still want to have people, quote unquote, rehabilitated so that their lives are stronger. Certainly they're getting a place to stay. We understand that, but it would be nice to have them move. Okay, I've been through this. I know how to do it. I know what my problems with my family are. Obviously they're financial, maybe it's job development, maybe it's workforce development, maybe it's health, it could be mental illness. I mean, the range of things. But we just put them back out. It is really what the numbers are showing us.
Right. So I want to make an important distinction that we're not the DHS shelters. Not everyone is getting a what's it been called like a shelter eviction notice or a limit on a shelter stay. Many of these exits are voluntary exits. Shelters can just be a really hard place for people to live. They're not, especially large congregate shelters. Folks that I talked to for this story were talking about how it can be unpleasant and how hard it is to navigate. But also it creates kind of all sorts of mobility within the system where folks are leaving for various reasons. Like you mentioned, they are exiting maybe they're trying to reconnect with family and doubling up with their family. Maybe they have to leave to go to the hospital. Sometimes they're ending up on the street. But what I talk to advocates about this issue is they suggest that these folks that are exiting unknown, it's more likely that they're kind of staying homeless and staying in the system than it is that they're finding a permanent place to stay. But there is a lot that we don't know.
You and me are an interesting pair to talk about these, because I am not a data person. And so you can provide the data for my crazy ideas. If the two of us sat together, just you and me, and said, how should we design a program so when they get out, they move to some more permanent housing, we would, if all things being equal, we would provide the kind of social service that would, quote unquote, rehabilitate them financially or all the other issues that we said, and create a way to do that. And then say, okay, your stay is up, or maybe the families just say, we can't take it. There could be danger in the shelters. I mean, we know what's in there. And then when they move out, there's something to get to. And of course, on the back end is the whole, I hate to use the word, affordable housing problem, because you and I could rehabilitate them, but not have a place for them to go. We need to do that at the same time. So now that we've just designed, and you could do all the numbers, now you and I have just designed a program.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that we do know a lot of the things that work. It's just a matter of finding the resources to make it happen. So those families that do exit to permanent housing, the majority of them are exiting to using a housing voucher to find a place to live. Often through the city's called City FEPS program to use a housing voucher.
Right.
And we simply just don't have enough housing vouchers for the need, especially since we have our growing homelessness population. And then also it's just really challenging to use a voucher. One of the folks I talked to for this story, Starlight, described it being first challenging to get the housing voucher in the first place, but even harder to use it. She described it as a full-time job looking around the city to try and find brokers and landlords that would take a housing voucher, because there's often discrimination against folks using vouchers because of stereotypes about what kind of renters.
Well, that's number one. And on the other hand, there's also people who would like to use developers would like to use it because it's a cheap way of just bringing in people and have the city pay for it, and they're happy to just do that. But of course, there are neighbors. I mean, I'm just describing something that we all know. You said that one of the problems obviously is resources. Do you think it's high or low on this on the mayor's priority scale? I mean, he knows it's one of his issues, and you probably can't answer that question, but I'm curious.
I can't exactly. I mean, in talking to DHS for the story, one thing that what's crazy is that actually the placements with housing vouchers, for example, are actually up year to year. If you look at the numbers, like more people this year have gotten housing vouchers and moved into housing than they did last year. The issue is that the need is growing. And the exits are not able to keep up with the swelling population. So it's kind of an inadequate release valve on this homelessness system.
That's true. And then, of course, you've got to evaluate what it is that causes homelessness. I'm curious about this because it's become such a big issue, and the mayor has been, on I don't want to say on all sides of it, but he's been reviewed positively and negatively about it. Is the migrant population seen as kind of lumped into all of this, or are they viewed by the city in a different way, which really, in many ways, there's so much commonality between your traditional homeless people and migrant people who've just come here with no home. I mean,
Yeah. I think this is a really important information gap that I think the reporting that we've done at City Limits has really made progress on filling. For example, the city didn't used to report the number of people in all the different agency shelters. And for example, only at the end of last summer did they begin reporting the number of people that were staying in kind of the temporary emergency shelters that were going up around the city where a lot of migrant families are staying. But there are still some important gaps in the data here. For example, we don't actually get exit data for those temporary shelters. So that's an even bigger mystery. So we're really just using the piece of the puzzle to keep building on this. And I have hopes that someday this information will be available for more types of shelters, and that it'll be in an accessible format.
And so in that way, the fact that you don't get the data for those folks, that is a split of some sort in how the city is handling it, because that information, we're so busy dealing with this, we're not going to add in however many we took in. Listen, Patrick Spauster from City Limits, thank you so much. This is it's very informative. It's very important that you write what you write, because we all see people who need help in our streets. And so we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Spauster, a freelance reporter, has a lot of stuff on City Limits about this very issue. We appreciate your time. Now we're going to take a short break, and then when we come back, we'll do a wonderful Bronx photographer. Don't go away.